It was just past 7 p.m. when Malik Thompson, newly released from a decade behind bars, heard the doorbell ring. He wasn't expecting anyone. His hands froze over the sink, water still running. The air shifted, tense, heavy. Slowly, he walked toward the door, each step echoing louder than the last in the silence of his rural home. When he opened it, his breath caught in his throat. There she was, Aaliyah, the woman he had confessed to murdering 10 years ago, standing on his porch. Alive. Her hair was longer, her frame slightly thinner, but it was her. Same eyes, same voice when she whispered, "We need to talk." Malik stumbled backward, grabbing the doorframe to steady himself. This couldn't be real. He had told the police everything. He had shown them where her body was buried. He served 10 years for her death. So who was this woman? How was she alive? And if she was, who was buried beneath the trees? Outside, the cicadas buzzed louder. Inside, Malik's heart pounded as a new nightmare began. Nothing made sense anymore. The truth wasn't just hidden, it had never been told at all. Before the full truth comes out, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Here, every story is more shocking than the last, and you won't want to miss the next twist. Be part of a community that questions everything, even the justice system itself. Malik Thompson was the kind of man people trusted instantly. He spoke softly, chose his words carefully, and listened more than he talked. A tenured philosophy professor at a community college in Atlanta, Malik had built a quiet, stable life defined by structure and intellect. His students respected him. His neighbors barely noticed him. And that's exactly how he liked it. He had grown up on the South Side, raised by his grandmother after losing both parents by the age of 10. Books became his sanctuary, ideas his armor. By 35, Malik owned a modest house, drove an aging sedan, and hosted weekly game nights with a few close friends. He never drank too much. He never got in trouble. He was predictable, and in a world full of chaos, predictable felt safe. When he met Aaliyah, everything shifted. She was magnetic, warm and enigmatic, a social worker with a tender heart and eyes that hinted at hidden chapters. Malik was instantly drawn to her quiet strength, the way she laughed from her chest, and how she never flinched when he talked about pain. Their connection was fast but deep. Within a year, they were married. The couple seemed perfect from the outside. Dinner parties, weekend getaways, volunteer work together. But behind closed doors, the cracks began to form. Aaliyah became distant. She stopped attending events. Sometimes she'd vanish for hours with no explanation. Malik, who craved control and understanding, struggled with the unknown. He asked questions. She gave vague answers. He pressed harder. She grew colder. Still, there were beautiful moments. She'd leave little notes in his books. They'd stay up late talking about art, life, God. But the love was tangled in confusion. His desire for truth and her need for privacy were on a constant collision course. Malik's colleagues noticed he was distracted. He missed a few classes. Simani, Aaliyah's sister, stopped visiting. The air in the house grew heavier with every passing day. Then came the night Aaliyah disappeared. At first, Malik claimed she left after an argument. But within 72 hours, he was in custody. No struggle, no lawyers. Just a quiet, exhausted man telling detectives, "I did it. I lost control." He led them to a shallow grave in a wooded area just outside the city. What they found was enough to convict him. The world saw a man who snapped. But now, 10 years later, if Aaliyah was alive, then who exactly was Malik Thompson? A liar? A pawn? Or a man who spent a decade in prison for a crime that never happened? Before everything shattered, Malik Thompson wanted nothing more than peace. After a childhood shaped by abandonment and a young adulthood consumed by overachievement, he longed for stillness. Not just silence, but the kind of peace that settles in your bones, that makes the world feel safe. He had found success, respect, even comfort, but love, that deep, anchoring kind, still eluded him. Until Aaliyah. When they met at a non-profit fundraiser, Malik was immediately drawn to her presence. Aaliyah was radiant but grounded, eloquent but soft-spoken. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, fiercely empathetic, deeply introspective, and disarmingly honest. They bonded over jazz, poetry, and a shared desire to heal their respective wounds quietly. Aaliyah had grown up in foster care, bounced between homes, and learned early how to protect herself. Malik, who had spent his life intellectualizing pain, admired her resilience. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. She moved into his home, brought life into his minimalist world. Art on the walls, color in the kitchen, vinyl records spinning late into the night. He cooked. She danced. They laughed, argued about philosophers, stayed up late reading. Their love felt earned, intentional, and Malik believed for the first time that maybe peace was possible. But peace, it seemed, wasn't enough for Aliyah. She talked often of starting over, not just relocating or switching jobs, but disappearing, beginning anew somewhere no one knew their names. Malik always chalked it up to her childhood instability. She'd mentioned cities like Portland or Santa Fe, where no one from her past could find her. He'd dismiss it with gentle humor. "We're not ghosts, Aliyah. We don't need to vanish." Still, the idea lingered. Aliyah worked as a crisis counselor, helping victims of domestic abuse. The stories followed her home. Sometimes she'd come back shaken, tears clinging to her lashes. Malik admired her passion, but he also feared what those stories were unlocking in her. She refused therapy, insisted she was fine, but he knew better. Their conversations turned heavier. She questioned the future. "What if love isn't enough?" she asked one night, staring at the ceiling. Malik, caught off guard, offered reassurances. "You're safe here," he whispered, but her silence suggested otherwise. Despite the tension, Malik clung to the vision he had built in his mind. Them, growing old in a quiet town, teaching, reading, maybe even adopting a child. He had researched adoption agencies, bookmarked houses outside the city, and even drafted a proposal for a joint community education center. His dreams were concrete. He believed Aliyah shared them, but as months passed, her behavior shifted. She stopped attending Sunday dinners with Imani, stopped texting her best friend. She became increasingly secretive, locking her phone, leaving the house late, coming back distracted. Malik's insecurities surged, but he suppressed them. He didn't want to be controlling. He told himself to trust her. Yet the distance between them widened. One night, he found her on the back porch, crying quietly. She didn't notice him at first. When he approached, she wiped her face and forced a smile. "Just tired," she said, but he saw the fear in her eyes. "Fear of what?" he asked. She shrugged. "Just memories." That's when Malik realized Aliyah was running from something, but he didn't know what. He thought love would be enough to ground her, but maybe her desire wasn't peace. Maybe it was escape. He started questioning everything. Was he part of what she was trying to flee? Had he failed to see something crucial? Still, he tried. He cooked her favorite meals, left notes in her books, took her on spontaneous weekend trips. She smiled, kissed him, even said she loved him. But the warmth was slowly being replaced with something colder, distant, guarded, haunted. In the quiet moments, Malik could feel her slipping away. And still he clung to hope. He told himself, "This is just a phase. Aliyah will come back to me. We'll find our rhythm again. I just have to hold on." But some desires live in the shadows, and sometimes when someone wants to disappear badly enough, they find a way. It started with little things. Aliyah began locking the bedroom door when she showered, even when Malik was home. She stopped leaving her journal on the nightstand. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, now never left her side. When it buzzed, she'd glance at it with a flicker of anxiety and quickly turn it over. Malik noticed every change. At first, he convinced himself it was stress. Her work was emotionally draining. She was helping women flee abusers, navigate trauma, find safety. Of course, it was affecting her. But the changes grew sharper, more deliberate. She started sleeping in the guest room a few nights a week. "Just need space," she'd say. He asked her gently if something was wrong. She smiled tightly. "I'm just tired, Malik. Work has me spread thin." But her eyes betrayed her. Then came the letters. It was a Saturday morning when Malik found the first one, slipped under the front door in a plain white envelope. No name, no return address. Just 3 words, scrawled in uneven handwriting. "She's not safe." At first he thought it was a threat, but Aliyah's reaction was even more unsettling. She didn't seem surprised. She folded the note, tucked it into her coat pocket and whispered, "I'll handle it." "Handle what?" When he pressed her, she snapped, "I told you to trust me." The next morning she was gone for hours. No explanation, no calls. A week later, another envelope arrived. This time inside was a photo. It was old, grainy. Aliyah with a man Malik had never seen. The image was unsettling. Her smile forced, his hand gripping her wrist too tightly. Malik waited for her on the porch that night, the photo in his hand. "Who is he?" he asked, his voice steady. Aaliyah froze. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Finally, she said, "Someone from before." She wouldn't say more, only that he was dangerous, that she thought she'd left him behind, that things were complicated. Malik felt a storm rising inside him, fear, confusion, jealousy. Why hadn't she told him? Who was sending these messages? Why now? Then the phone calls began. At first, they were silent, just breathing on the other end. Then, late one night, Malik picked up and heard a man's voice. "You think she's yours?" the voice rasped. "You don't even know who she is." The line went dead. That same night, Aaliyah refused to come out of the bathroom for nearly an hour. When she finally did, her hands were shaking. "I need to leave," she whispered. "Not from you. From all of this." He offered to go with her, to move, disappear, start fresh, but she shook her head. "It's not that simple." Over the next few days, her paranoia intensified. She barely slept, jumped at small noises. One night, Malik found her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., clutching a kitchen knife. "I thought I heard something," she said, eyes wide, voice flat. He began to wonder if she was breaking down or hiding something darker. Then she vanished. Malik came home from work and found the house eerily quiet. Her car was gone. Her phone, charger, wallet, everything gone. On the table, a note in her handwriting. "I'm sorry. Don't look for me." No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. For 3 days, Malik tried to convince himself she'd be back, that she needed space, that maybe she just ran. But deep down, something told him she wasn't coming back. When the police questioned him, he cooperated. Calm, grieving, confused. Until, after hours of interrogation, something in him cracked. He confessed, said they fought, that things got out of hand, that he panicked, that he buried her body in the woods. He took them to the site. They found a body. And for everyone watching, the story made sense. A man who lost control. A woman trying to leave. Another tragedy of love turned violent. But nothing about Aaliyah had ever been simple, and neither was the truth. The interrogation room was cold, sterile. The hum of the overhead fluorescent lights was constant, like a low, judgmental whisper. Malik sat hunched over, hands clasped tightly in front of him, fingers twitching, knuckles white. 2 detectives watched him from across the table, one silent, the other scribbling notes like Malik's breath alone was incriminating. It had been almost 72 hours since Aaliyah vanished. The first night, Malik didn't sleep. He walked the house in circles, checking doors, replaying their last conversation, listening for her car in the distance. The second night, panic took over. He drove aimlessly for hours, looking down alleyways, pulling into gas stations, scanning faces. By the third day, he was sitting in the back of a patrol car, heart thudding, telling himself over and over, "I didn't hurt her." But now, under the weight of silence and suspicion, something cracked. Detective Andre Walker leaned forward, voice low, almost kind. "Malik, we just want the truth. You've always been the calm one, the rational one. But even the best of us, we break." Malik looked up. His eyes were glassy, distant. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. That was all they needed. The words spilled out after that, halting, hesitant, but damning. He told them about the fight, said she wanted to leave and he couldn't handle it, that she said things that pushed him over the edge, that he grabbed her arms, that she fell, hit her head, that he panicked. "I buried her," he said, voice barely audible. "I didn't know what else to do." Detectives exchanged a glance. Walker slid a recorder across the table. "Tell it again, from the beginning." And he did. He described the location. Wooded, isolated, a place they used to hike together. He gave them coordinates, described the tree with the forked trunk, the patch of earth still soft beneath the moss. He said he wrapped her in a blanket before he covered her with dirt. It was all too vivid. That night, police and forensic teams descended on the area Malik had described. It was after midnight when they found the body, badly decomposed but clearly female, wrapped in fabric, jewelry still intact. The next morning, Malik Thompson's face was on every news station in Georgia. Professor confesses to wife's murder. He was booked without bail. His mugshot, wide eyes, sunken cheeks, was plastered across every platform. Former students posted screenshots with captions like, "I always knew something was off." Reporters camped outside the precinct, Talk shows speculated motives. True crime bloggers dissected every detail of the confession, and the court of public opinion moved fast. Aaliyah's family was devastated. Imani, who hadn't spoken to Malik in months, collapsed when she saw the headlines. Their mother was hospitalized after suffering a minor stroke. Friends of the couple offered statements filled with disbelief and horror. "They seemed so in love," one said. "He was quiet, but we never imagined this." The media dubbed it the educator's crime. A tragic irony, Malik, the man who taught ethics, now accused of the ultimate betrayal. In the county jail, Malik was kept in isolation for his own safety. Inmates had seen the news. Some remembered his face from lectures or public panels. He became a symbol of hypocrisy, of broken love, of the thin line between intellect and impulse. His attorney tried to negotiate a deal. The DA wouldn't budge. The trial moved swiftly. The defense leaned on emotional duress, temporary insanity. They emphasized his clean record, the confession, the remorse, but the prosecution painted a different picture. Control, possessiveness, obsession masked as love. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty of second-degree murder, sentenced to 22 years. As the verdict was read, Malik didn't flinch. He just closed his eyes. Outside the courthouse, Imani addressed the press. Her voice shook with grief and fury. "He didn't just take my sister's life, he took our peace. He wore a mask for years, and we never saw it." For the next 10 years, Malik lived behind concrete and steel, waking at the same time every morning, eating meals without flavor, reading books that no longer offered escape. He spoke to no one, took no visitors, didn't appeal. Because in his heart, he believed what the world believed, that he had killed the only woman he ever loved, that he deserved the punishment. He became a ghost of the man he once was. But deep inside, buried beneath layers of guilt and confusion, there was a flicker of doubt. A question he never said aloud. What if I didn't do it? The conviction of Malik Thompson sent shockwaves through every corner of his life. It wasn't just a legal sentence. It was a total collapse of identity, relationships, and meaning. For someone who had built his world around discipline, logic, and control, being labeled a murderer stripped him of everything that once grounded him. The day he was sentenced, the courtroom sat in thick silence. Aaliyah's side of the gallery was filled with friends and family wearing shades of black. Imani sat in the front row, unmoving, her face like stone. When the judge announced the 22-year sentence, no one cried. There was no outburst, just a collective exhale, as if the weight of waiting for justice had finally been released. But the silence that followed was far from peace. Imani stopped answering phone calls. Friends from the university erased Malik's photos from group events, deleted old messages, blocked his number. Colleagues removed his name from published papers. The college where he once lectured announced a formal severing of all ties, citing moral and professional grounds. Even neighbors who had once shared coffee and conversation now whispered as they walked past the Thompson house, which sat abandoned, grass overgrown. The home that once echoed with music and laughter now collected dust. For Aaliyah's family, the aftermath was just as brutal. Her mother, Loretta, never recovered from the shock. Already fragile from health issues, the news of her daughter's murder and Malik's arrest sent her into a downward spiral. She suffered a second stroke 3 months later and required round-the-clock care. Imani stepped into the role of caretaker, but the bitterness consumed her. She spent nights listening to voicemails from Aaliyah, rereading texts, trying to make sense of what she missed. She couldn't accept that her sister was gone, much less at the hands of someone they had all trusted. And the body, though found, though identified, offered no closure. It was badly decomposed beyond recognition. The forensics confirmed it was female and matched Aaliyah's dental records. But there were no fingerprints, no photos from the site released publicly. Just a box handed to the family and a quiet funeral with a closed casket. Imani never believed that was enough. There was something off, she told a friend later. Too clean, too fast, but everyone told me to let it go. Malik, meanwhile, disappeared into prison life with quiet resignation. He refused visitors, refused to speak at parole hearings. He worked in the library, read obsessively, and kept a journal no one else ever saw. Inmates who tried to provoke him were met with silence. He was neither aggressive nor friendly, just there, existing, breathing, counting the years. The media eventually moved on. Another case would take its place, another tragedy, another face. But not everyone forgot. Jordan Reed, a local journalist who had covered the trial in its early days, kept files on the case. Something about it never sat right. The confession seemed too rehearsed. The timeline had gaps. There were whispers from sources that the original evidence collected from the scene was thin, circumstantial. But when Reed pushed, he was stonewalled. They got a confession, a detective had told him. End of story. But Reed had grown up in the same part of Atlanta as Malik. He remembered the professor's free public lectures, the mentorships, the way Malik spoke about truth like it was sacred. He didn't look like a man who snapped, and Reed knew how often black men were rushed through the justice system when emotions ran high. Still, with no surviving victim, no alternate suspect, and no motive that made more sense than a domestic argument turned deadly, Reed shelved the story until the day he got a call, 10 years later. But back then, during those first long months after sentencing, the world kept moving without Malik. The university replaced him. The programs he built were rebranded. His students graduated. His legacy was scrubbed clean. The house was sold. The tree under which he had proposed to Aaliyah was cut down during a neighborhood renovation project. Even time turned its back on him. In his cell, Malik wrestled with guilt. He had confessed. He had led them to a body. The court, the law, the world, everyone believed he did it. And yet, when the nights grew still and the weight of silence grew unbearable, a single thought would claw its way to the surface. What if I didn't? What if something had happened to Aaliyah that he couldn't explain? What if he had been manipulated, coerced, drugged? He didn't remember blood. He didn't remember the final moment. Only fragments, shouting, her walking away, a slammed door, then blackness. But no one wanted uncertainty. They wanted resolution. So Malik gave them one. He told the story they needed, and he paid the price. But outside the prison walls, the truth waited, patient, unseen, and more dangerous than anyone imagined. If this story has already made you think, leave a like and comment what you would have done in their place. Every opinion matters, and might reveal a detail others missed. Let's piece this puzzle together. Your perspective could be the missing key. Malik had been out of prison for 6 months when the impossible happened. It was a Thursday evening just after dusk, and the air in his quiet rental cabin on the outskirts of Athens, Georgia, was thick with summer humidity. Malik had spent the day in routine, organizing the few books he'd brought from prison, walking the perimeter of the property, avoiding the town. He didn't have visitors, he didn't speak to neighbors, he barely spoke at all. He hadn't rebuilt his life. He was only surviving it. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft taps. Deliberate. Malik approached the door cautiously, half expecting it to be a delivery mistake or some local church group offering salvation. But when he opened the door, his world tilted. Aaliyah stood there. Not a memory, not a ghost, not someone who looked like her, but her, alive. She was thinner, her hair longer, and her eyes carried more weight than he remembered. But there was no mistaking her, not for Malik. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move. Aaliyah broke the silence. "Malik," she said, voice trembling, "we need to talk." His knees nearly buckled. Inside, they sat across from each other in the same room where he'd spent the last months, convinced he was living penance for her death. The silence stretched between them like a canyon. He whispered, "How? I'm sorry," she said first. "You were never supposed to go to prison." His breath caught. "What does that mean?" She looked down. "It's complicated." He stared at her, eyes wide. "Complicated? I confessed to killing you. They found a body. I buried you." "No," she said quietly. "You didn't." The days that followed were a blur of disbelief, rage, and unraveling reality. Aaliyah stayed in the cabin. She refused to go to the police, at least not yet. She claimed she was being followed, that coming back now was a risk. But she also promised him the truth. Piece by piece, it came out. She had faked her death. It hadn't started that way. At first, she simply wanted to disappear, to escape a cycle of fear, threats, and control she believed would never end. The letters, the late-night calls, the man in the shadows, all of it had been real. Caleb Brooks, her ex-boyfriend from years earlier, had found her again. He'd threatened not just her, but Malik too. She tried to handle it herself, she said. She didn't want to burden Malik, didn't think he'd understand. So she planned to run. But on the night she left, Things spun out of control. Caleb intercepted her. What happened in the woods, she claimed, was a blur to her as well. There had been a struggle. She remembered screaming, then blacking out. When she woke, Caleb was gone. So was her phone, her ID. And she was being hunted. She fled across state lines, stayed off the grid, used cash, slept in shelters, then eventually got help from a former client who owed her a favor. That's how she got new papers, a new name and a place to hide. The body in the woods, I don't know, Aaliyah admitted, her voice cracking. But it wasn't me. Malik couldn't process it. He wanted to scream. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to hold her. Instead, he asked one question. Why come back now? She met his eyes. Because I saw your face on the news when you got out. And I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. That night, Malik didn't sleep. He watched her as she lay curled on the couch, unsure if she was real or a figment conjured by years of guilt and solitude. The next morning, he made a decision. He called the one person he thought might listen, Jordan Reed. The journalist picked up after one ring. You're not going to believe what I have to tell you, Malik said, and he was right. Jordan Reed had covered hundreds of cases during his career, some tragic, others infuriating, but none had ever haunted him like the story of Malik Thompson. Something about the quiet professor-turned-convicted killer never sat right. Malik's confession, his complete lack of resistance, the absence of solid forensic evidence, it all felt rushed. But without a living victim, there was no room to question the official version. Until now, when Jordan heard Malik's voice on the phone, quiet and measured, saying, "She's alive," he froze. "Aaliyah's alive. She's here. With me." Every instinct screamed this couldn't be true, but Malik didn't sound delusional. He sounded like a man teetering between vindication and breakdown. Within hours, Jordan was on the road to Athens. He parked a mile away from Malik's cabin, walked the rest on foot to avoid drawing attention. What he found inside stunned him. Aaliyah, real, breathing, nervous, yes, but alive. He had covered her funeral, stood outside the courthouse after Malik's sentencing. He had even interviewed her grieving sister. Now she sat in front of him, sipping tea with trembling hands. "I didn't die," she said softly. "But someone did." Jordan recorded everything with her permission. She detailed the abuse, the threats, the fear that consumed her for years. Caleb Brooks wasn't just a figure from her past. He was a predator, and when he found her again, everything unraveled. Aaliyah believed she had no choice. She had tried restraining orders, police reports. Nothing worked. When he showed up in Atlanta, watching her from across streets, slipping letters under their door, leaving voicemails at odd hours, she knew she was being hunted. So she planned her disappearance. But on the night she tried to run, Caleb intervened. She blacked out during the altercation. When she woke, her ID was gone, and she was somewhere unfamiliar, bleeding, barefoot and terrified. She ran, stayed gone. "I didn't know anyone would get blamed," she told Jordan. "Not like that. Not Malik, but someone had been blamed. Someone had been buried." And now Jordan had a bigger question. Who was the woman in the woods? The official records named her as Aaliyah, based on dental records. But Jordan had read the coroner's notes years ago. The body was in poor condition, barely distinguishable. The ID was used to confirm the identity. But what if it wasn't hers? He began pulling files, tracking every person Aaliyah had known before her disappearance. He looked into missing persons reports from that year. The deeper he went, the more holes appeared. One name jumped out, Danielle Moss. A woman reported missing 2 weeks before Aaliyah disappeared. Same build, similar features, no confirmed sightings since. Jordan went to the ME's office, demanded access to archived DNA evidence. He used his press credentials, old favors, and even threats of exposure to push the right people. He reached out to a contact in the state crime lab, who agreed to run a retest using new samples provided, this time comparing it against Danielle's mother, who was still alive. The result shattered everything. The body found in the woods was not Aaliyah Thompson. It was Danielle Moss. Jordan confronted the district attorney's office with the findings. At first, they stonewalled him, denied access to further records, refused to comment. But the data was irrefutable. Malik Thompson had been convicted of killing a woman who wasn't even his wife. That alone should have been enough to reopen the case. But there was more. Caleb Brooks, the ex-boyfriend Aaliyah claimed had terrorized her, was alive. and his name had surfaced in several police complaints across multiple states. Stalking, domestic abuse, one unresolved assault case in Tennessee, but he had never been arrested. Jordan traced him to a rundown motel in Alabama. The front desk manager recognized the photo immediately. "Yeah," he said. "He was here a few weeks ago, checked out fast, didn't leave a forwarding address." Caleb was still out there. With Aaliyah's reappearance and the discovery of the misidentified body, the foundation of the original case crumbled. Jordan published a bombshell article titled, "The Woman Who Came Back and the Body That Wasn't Hers." It went viral in under 24 hours. The court of public opinion flipped on its axis. Malik's name returned to headlines, but this time not as a monster, as a question mark, as a man possibly wronged by the very system that claimed to protect truth. The Georgia Innocence Project stepped in. Lawyers filed motions. Demands were made for a full investigation. And while the state scrambled to respond, Malik sat silently in the same chair where Aaliyah had returned to him, still unsure whether to believe this was all redemption or just another trap. But for the first time in over a decade, the walls were shaking and the truth was clawing its way out. Malik Thompson sat in the back of a packed courtroom, head bowed, hands trembling in his lap. The air buzzed with anticipation. Journalists filled every available seat, and cameras waited like vultures just beyond the courthouse doors. He had walked through this building once before, 10 years ago, in shackles, under a rain of condemnation. Back then, people looked at him with disgust. Now they looked with curiosity, confusion, some even with sympathy. The judge's voice called the room to order. This wasn't a retrial, not yet, but it was a hearing to consider vacating his conviction based on new evidence, and that evidence had shaken the system to its core. Aaliyah was alive. The woman Malik was accused of murdering, confessed to burying, had been sitting beside him for the past week, alive and exhausted. And the body found in the woods, long thought to be hers, was now confirmed to be Danielle Moss, another missing woman no one had been looking for. When the judge asked if Malik had anything to say, he rose slowly, uncertainly. "I didn't come here to clear my name," he said, voice low but steady. "I came here because the truth matters. I told the story they needed me to tell, but it was never the real story. I lost everything, and so did someone else." He looked at the prosecution table, where the assistant district attorney sat, visibly sweating. "I confessed because I thought I was guilty, because I couldn't remember what happened, because the world around me said I did it, and I believed them. But the system didn't just fail me, it failed Danielle Moss, and it failed Aaliyah." His voice didn't crack. His posture didn't waver. For the first time in 10 years, Malik stood as the man he once was, before the label, before the shame. The judge recessed the hearing, stating that a formal review would begin immediately. Malik was allowed to leave, no longer a prisoner, but not yet exonerated. Outside, the crowd surged, cameras flashed, microphones lunged. "Aaliyah, where have you been? Malik, did you kill Danielle Moss? Why didn't you fight the charges back then?" Neither of them answered. They walked in silence, side by side, through the chaos, and into a black sedan waiting around the corner. Jordan Reed drove, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. They weren't safe yet. Back at the cabin, the mood was tense. Malik stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee pot. It gurgled quietly, oblivious to the storm swirling in the minds of everyone present. Jordan was the first to speak. "We need to find Caleb. If he's alive, if he was there that night, he's the key." Aaliyah nodded slowly. "He won't come out unless he's cornered. He always watches from the shadows, never steps into the light." But Jordan had done his homework. He pulled up an address on his laptop, a P.O. box rented in Caleb's name just 2 towns away. Surveillance footage from the mail center, time-stamped only days earlier, showed a tall man in a hoodie glancing around before entering. Aaliyah stiffened. That's him. The trap was set. With help from local authorities and under media pressure, a sting operation was coordinated. It took 3 days. Caleb was careful, paranoid, always changing routines. But on the 4th day, he showed up at the box. Police moved in. He ran through an alley, over a fence, until he was tackled face down in the gravel, screaming, "You don't know what she did. You don't know what she made me do." At the station, under questioning, Caleb cracked. He admitted to seeing Aaliyah that night, admitted to confronting her, to dragging her into the woods, but he denied killing anyone, said there was another woman, one who tried to help Aaliyah, said there was confusion, yelling, blood, and then nothing. He blacked out. But forensic teams recovered items from Caleb's motel room, a bracelet matching one listed in Danielle Moss's missing persons report, traces of blood in the sink, and in his trunk, dirt-caked gloves and torn fabric. The DA had no choice. A motion to vacate Malik Thompson's conviction was filed the next morning. When the judge announced the decision in court, Malik didn't react. He simply exhaled. 10 years of silence, of shadows, of self-doubt, released in one breath. "You are hereby exonerated," the judge said. "Your record will be cleared. The state offers its formal apology for this miscarriage of justice." The courtroom didn't erupt. It held its breath, because no amount of paperwork could erase what had been lost. Malik walked out, not triumphant, but free. The headlines changed. Convicted professor exonerated after wife reappears alive. Malik Thompson freed after 10-year injustice. Aaliyah Thompson speaks. "I thought he was dead too." Public sentiment shifted. Some people apologized, others made excuses. But Malik didn't care. He didn't seek revenge or fame. He only wanted space, time, and, maybe, healing. Aaliyah stayed a few more days. They talked, argued, cried. Then she left again, not in fear this time, but to start over on her own terms. "I can't fix what happened," she told him. "But I can't stay in it either," he understood. Jordan's story aired on national television. Interviews, podcast specials, documentaries followed. Malik was offered book deals, speaking engagements. He declined most. But he agreed to one televised statement. On camera, he sat in a worn leather chair, a bookshelf behind him. "I was never looking for redemption," he said. "Just the truth, and the truth has a cost. But it also has power. Sometimes it comes late. But it comes, and with that, he stood. A man not defined by what was done to him, but by what he chose to do with the truth." When the judge declared Malik Thompson's conviction vacated, the sound that filled the courtroom wasn't cheers. It was silence. A heavy, stunned silence that carried the weight of 10 years of grief, confusion, and suppressed questions. As Malik stepped out of the courthouse a free man, the crowd outside buzzed with curiosity. Reporters called his name, camera flashes stung his eyes, and microphones crowded his face. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Behind him, Aaliyah stood just outside the threshold, eyes downcast, barely able to look at the crowd. For the world, her return had upended every certainty. She had been a symbol of tragedy. Now she was something else entirely, an enigma, a survivor, a woman blamed as much as she was pitied. The public didn't know how to react. Some called Malik a hero, an emblem of systemic failure and quiet resilience. Others demanded to know why he'd confessed to a murder he didn't commit. In online forums, people speculated wildly. Was he protecting someone? Was Aaliyah lying? Was it all a setup? At the Atlanta Police Department, Detective Andre Walker sat at his desk, the news replaying on a muted screen in the corner. The words, "Malik Thompson exonerated," scrolled across the bottom. He leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. He had interrogated Malik a decade ago. He had sat across from him and heard the words, "I did it." At the time, it seemed cut and dry. A confession, a body, a motive rooted in passion and jealousy. But now, Walker felt the bitter sting of doubt. Maybe he'd pushed too hard. Maybe he hadn't listened closely enough. Maybe, like so many others in the system, he'd wanted a resolution more than he wanted the truth. Across town, at a modest senior care facility, Loretta James, Aaliyah's mother, watched the live news broadcast from her recliner. Her face was thinner than it had been, her hands unsteady. For years, she believed her daughter had died violently. She had grieved, buried ashes handed to her in a box, and told herself to be strong for Imani. And now, her daughter was alive, but the reunion hadn't come with celebration. Aaliyah had visited only once, nervous, apologetic, distant. Loretta didn't know how to forgive her yet. "She broke me," Loretta had whispered to one of the nurses. Then she came back like nothing happened. For Imani Carter, Aaliyah's older sister, the flood of emotions was even harder to contain. Anger, relief, betrayal, and guilt. She had testified against Malik. She had stood in court, sworn under oath, and called him a manipulator. Now, the man she helped convict was innocent, and her sister, who she had mourned and honored for 10 years, had kept it all buried. When a reporter tracked her down for comment, Imani simply said, "I'm not ready to talk." But behind closed doors, she began writing, pages and pages, about grief, about memory, about believing the wrong things and what it means to survive the right way. At the Georgia Innocence Project headquarters, the mood was somber despite the win. Malik's case had become a symbol for reform. Law students reviewed every detail, pointing out flaws in evidence handling, confirmation bias in interrogation tactics, and systemic cracks that led to wrongful convictions. One young attorney said, "If Malik hadn't been educated, if he hadn't been mentally strong, if Aaliyah hadn't returned, he'd still be in there, or worse." In the days that followed, Malik received hundreds of messages, some supportive, others cruel. Offers poured in. Interviews, documentaries, podcasts. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, but Malik declined most of them. He spent his time walking in silence, revisiting places he hadn't seen in a decade, parks where he and Aaliyah used to sit, bookstores where he'd given lectures, the steps of the old church where he once taught ethics classes on Sundays. At one point, he passed by the university where he had once taught. The building had a new name now. His office had been cleared out years ago. A young professor passed by, carrying books, oblivious to who Malik was. He stood there for a long time, staring at the glass doors, then turned and walked away. Aaliyah, too, stayed out of sight. She gave one interview, controlled, soft-spoken, defensive. She spoke of fear, trauma, and survival. She said she never wanted Malik to suffer, but she also didn't know how to come back from where she had gone. Public reaction to her was divisive. Some called her brave, others called her a coward. Many questioned why she hadn't returned sooner. But Aaliyah didn't argue with any of it. She vanished again, not to hide, but to reclaim a sliver of peace. Meanwhile, Danielle Moss's family, who had believed her missing, not dead, held a memorial in her honor. This time, with her name spoken clearly, her photo shown proudly, her life remembered. She had been lost in the cracks, used as a body to close someone else's case. The DA's office issued a statement acknowledging the failure, but stopped short of admitting negligence. Malik never asked for an apology. Jordan Reed, whose reporting had helped crack the case wide open, continued to follow up. His expose was nominated for awards. He started a podcast series on wrongful convictions and used Malik's story to launch a fund for exonerees trying to rebuild their lives. As for Malik, he began to write again, not memoirs, not confessions, just thoughts about time, truth, memory, and forgiveness. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't sue the city, though lawyers advised him to. He simply said, "I've already lost enough years in courtrooms." He bought a quiet house near the edge of town, planted a garden, started over, not as a victim, not as a martyr, but as a man who had survived what many wouldn't. And though the world may not have fully understood his story, Malik no longer needed them to. He knew the truth, and he was finally free. What happened to Malik Thompson isn't just a personal tragedy. It's a mirror held up to a justice system that too often values closure over truth. His case is a haunting example of how vulnerable even the most intelligent, composed, and seemingly prepared individuals are to the crushing machinery of wrongful conviction. Malik confessed not because he was guilty, but because he was exhausted, emotionally cornered, pressured by detectives, shattered by trauma, and grieving the woman he believed he had lost forever. Under that weight, even the clearest minds can blur. Even the most grounded men can be led to believe in guilt that doesn't belong to them. And then there's Aaliyah. Her story complicates the narrative. She's not the villain nor the hero. She is a survivor of intimate terror, caught in a cycle of fear that forced her to flee, to disappear, to protect herself in ways that may have cost others more than she ever imagined. Her silence didn't just hide her. It buried another woman. Danielle Moss was collateral damage in a system too ready to close a file without asking enough questions. This case raises difficult questions. How often do we mistake convenience for justice? How many people sit in prison not because of what they've done, but because of what the system needed them to be? How many lives are rewritten by silence, by trauma, by the rush to find someone, anyone, to blame? Malik's journey forces us to confront our comfort with certainty. Society tends to prefer a neat ending, a killer, a confession, a sentence. But life rarely follows a script. Sometimes the truth comes in fragments. Sometimes it's buried beneath fear, lies, or simple human error. We must also consider the bystanders, the detectives who stopped investigating after a confession, the prosecutors who ignored inconsistencies, the jurors who made swift decisions based on limited facts, and perhaps most unsettling, the community that wanted resolution more than truth. Malik paid the price for all of it. 10 years of his life, gone. His career, his reputation, his peace, shattered. And yet, when given the chance to retaliate, to rage, to condemn, he chose instead to reflect, to rebuild, and to speak about truth with the same clarity he once used in lecture halls. That is the lesson. Truth is not always immediate. Justice is not always loud. And silence, whether born from fear or failure, has consequences far beyond the moment it begins. The cost of that silence was 10 years of freedom, a life misjudged, a name dragged through the mud, and a woman long forgotten buried twice, first by death and then by a system that never looked back. In the months following Malik Thompson's exoneration, life didn't return to normal, because normal had been permanently rewritten. There was no parade, no ceremonial welcome back into society. There was only the slow, uneasy process of reintegration, of building something entirely new on top of a decade of absence. Malik declined most interviews and media appearances. The world had spent 10 years dissecting his story without him. He had no desire to entertain it now. Instead, he purchased a small home in rural Georgia, far from the noise, and planted a garden where he could feel the ground beneath his feet again. It wasn't escape. It was healing. He began teaching again, not at a university, but in local community centers and libraries. Small groups, quiet sessions, no press, just conversations about truth, systems, philosophy, and resilience. People came not because he was a headline, but because he had lived what most only studied: injustice, isolation, redemption. Aaliyah Thompson disappeared from the public eye shortly after the court ruling. No one knew exactly where she went. Some say she moved out west. Others believe she changed her name again. What's known is that she left behind a detailed statement, addressed to Malik, to Danielle's family, and to the public. In it, she expressed regret, explained her fear, and acknowledged the consequences of her silence. It wasn't an apology everyone could accept, but it was a beginning. Danielle Moss's family received a formal apology from the state. Her mother, Deborah Moss, was finally able to lay her daughter to rest under the right name. She mattered, Deborah said in a press conference. Even if they forgot her, we never did. The Georgia Innocence Project used Malik's case to advocate for mandatory videotaping of all police interrogations, greater scrutiny in forensic identifications, and more rigorous review processes before accepting a confession as conclusive evidence. The project's campaign gained momentum, leading to legislation proposals across multiple states. Detective Andre Walker quietly retired 2 months after the case was officially closed. He never made a public statement, but internal sources said he struggled with how it ended. "We were supposed to find the truth," he reportedly told a colleague, "not just a name to blame." Jordan Reed's podcast series became one of the most downloaded investigative true crime shows of the year. But even as he garnered awards and attention, he reminded his audience, this story isn't about fame, it's about loss, and what we owe to those we accuse, especially when we're wrong. And Malik? He never returned to the courtroom, never sought retribution, never asked for what the world thought he deserved. He simply lived. And in a world that had once taken everything from him, that was the most powerful justice he could claim. What do you believe really happened that night in the woods? Was Malik Thompson a victim of a broken system, or was there still more he wasn't saying? Did Aaliyah truly have no other option but to vanish? And what about Danielle Moss? How many others like her have been buried without justice, used as puzzle pieces in stories that don't belong to them? This case leaves us with more than just answers. It leaves us with questions, deep, uncomfortable ones, about truth, about trust, about how quickly we're willing to believe a story when it gives us a villain to blame, and how long we're willing to ignore the silence of those who no longer have a voice. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you believe Malik truly found peace after everything he endured? Should Aaliyah be held responsible for her silence? And what should happen to the system that failed not once, but twice? Drop your theory in the comments below. Every angle, every suspicion, every piece you think still doesn't fit. Because stories like this deserve to be questioned and remembered. And if this story made you stop and think, if it moved you, shocked you, or even made you angry, share it with your friends, with someone who needs to see what silence can cost. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you stories like this, real cases, real people, and mysteries that refuse to rest. Don't just watch, be part of the conversation. Because justice doesn't start in the courtroom, it starts with you.